In 1999, Morpheus offered Neo a choice between a red pill and a blue pill. In 2018, this country fractured between red and blue. In 2022, I'm here to tell you that if you really want the truth, more voters are neither red or blue. Yet, they have no representation, no choice, and no options. They have to choose between candidates chosen by the red people or the blue people. I'm David Esrati, and I'm running for Congress as an American, as in red, white, and blue. I'm a veteran, an activist, and a small businessman. I'm asking you to join me in reminding the professional politicians in Congress who their bosses are. I support ranked choice voting, campaign finance reform, and a verified voter information system, all so we can stop having the best politicians money can buy. It's time to elect a veteran who will work for you, no matter what color they want to label you. Please go to electesrati.com and learn more. I'm David Esrati, and I approve this message. Jurassic Park, you thought those little baby dinosaurs were cute until they turned into out-of-control carnivores. That's sort of what happens to government when we elect people based on very expensive advertising campaigns and propaganda. I'm David Esrati. I'm a veteran and a small businessman running for Congress. You don't want professional ad people and pollsters to sway your vote. All those hot-button issues like gun control, abortion, borders are all politicized to stop you from voting rationally. And thinking rationally seems to be in short supply these days. Most Americans have been voting against their own best self-interest for a long time because we've allowed money to buy our leaders. 1 million Americans died in the last 2 years because our leaders couldn't lead. It wasn't that hard. Mask, distance, test, and then vaccinate. In an instant, we had billions to spend on healthcare for COVID, when for years we've been told we can't provide healthcare for everyone equally in this country. That's an unintended consequence of the pandemic. If you think about it, our government can pretty much do whatever it wants, or what the people who buy our politicians tell our leaders to do. We also had a ton of money to prop up businesses. The next thing you know, it turns out that a living wage was not only possible, but necessary. As a small businessman who won't sell you out to corporate interests and lobbyists, I can tell you that it's time to fully understand the consequences of companies like Amazon, Facebook, and Google and their effect on small business, and to remind you that small business is the #1 creator of jobs in this country. So this next election, don't trust this ad or any other political ad. Do your homework and think before you vote. It's time to put this ad man in Congress because I know that the best advertising is based on the truth, not the size of the budget or payola. Or you can just vote based on who has the money to buy their way into Congress and live with the consequences. I'm David Esrati, and I approve this message. Hi, I'm David Esrati, and welcome to my live stream town hall where you can interact with your congressional candidate every day at 4, Monday through Friday, because a congressman is an elected representative who should be in touch with his constituents, something my opponent has never done in all the time he's been in office, never had a town hall. He doesn't want to talk to you, but that's beside the point. Just a quick update, Ohio 10 is an illegally gerrymandered district. It will be revised in 2022 to be more friendly to Democrats because right now it's a +9. It includes all of Montgomery County, all of Greene County, and a sliver of Clark County. So, yeah, veterans, supporting veterans, service to your country. What does it mean and what does it entitle you to other than a free meal on Veterans Day from Applebee's? I served. I never served in combat. I was never deployed. I was in during what was relatively a peaceful time. And I'm very lucky and thankful for that. But military service is hard. It's not for everybody, and fewer people choose that path anymore. And in fact, the statistics say that less than 25% of American youth could even qualify to serve anymore, which is a serious problem. If we had to go to war, excuse me, it's a scary state of affairs that many people are just not eligible. Mike Turner likes to say he's all military friendly and he works for the base and he's very dedicated to making sure our military and our defense is strong. However, he recently voted no on the PACT Act. That's hard to say and hard to understand, but basically it was a House bill that all the Democrats passed, some Republicans passed, but Mike Turner did not. It recently passed in the Senate. It was to make sure that veterans of the Gulf Wars who were exposed to an absolutely stupid process of getting rid of garbage and waste and fuel, they made burn pits and open air burned chemicals, ammunition, garbage, and the people who were stationed there, if they were downwind, were sucking down the smells of this and the carcinogens and the pathogens and getting very ill, and they're dying now. There's a whole bunch of problems and the VA needs more money to care for them. The thing about war and the progress of war, there were wounds in previous wars that were fatal just because they couldn't get you to care fast enough and the care couldn't deal with it fast enough. But we've improved battlefield medicine to the point that people who get very badly wounded survive and require even higher costs in terms of medical care and providing for them over time. That's what 20 years of war does. And we might have lost a lot of less people, but we had a lot more that got wounded permanently. Support for veterans is something that is important in this country. It's not important to Mike Turner because veterans don't line his pockets like the military-industrial complex does. If you look at his donors, they are military contractors. They're billionaires. Some of those billionaires who made a lot of money off of the wars. That is a major problem. I went to serve because I thought it was the right thing to do for our country, because I needed time between high school and college to get my act together, to learn discipline, to learn structure, and to jump out of perfectly good airplanes. That should tell you something about me. Mike Turner went to law school, where he learned how to be a lawyer, where my feelings about lawyers are not that good, so we're going to skip over that part. Because my father always said, if you don't have anything nice to say about somebody, don't. It's some lesson I haven't taken too well. But the reality is, back in 1960, President Eisenhower in his farewell address said, we annually spend on military security more than the net income of all United States corporations. I don't think that's true today because some of the corporations are a lot bigger now and make a lot more money, and you have to measure things. But we spend an awful lot on defense. In fact, we spend more than the next 8 countries put together. We have all that money to supply weapon systems and things that we couldn't even dream of years ago, to fight wars that have been obsolete since the invention of the atom bomb. But we keep feeding that machine, and Eisenhower warned us. And I think it's important that you hear it directly from him. So I'm going to run the clip and let you hear it so it's fresh in your memory before we continue.
A vital element in keeping the peace is our military establishment. Our arms must be mighty, ready for instant action, so that no potential aggressor may be tempted to risk his own destruction. Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals.
There's more to the story than just that quote. I thought it was interesting that he also said, in the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. That's the buying of our politicians. And he says we must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals so the security and liberty may prosper together. He talks about the military overtaking the solitary inventor, the scientist, because government contracts would become the only contracts out there. And he says the prospect of domination of the nation's scholars by federal employment, project allocations, and the power of money is ever present and is gravely to be regarded. He was worried about such a large portion of the economy being spent on defense. And he goes on, down the long lane of the history yet to be written, America knows that this world of ours, ever growing smaller, must avoid becoming a community of dreadful fear and hate, and be instead a proud confederation of mutual trust and respect. Trust and respect of our government is what stopped happening on January 6th. Trust and respect is what veterans expect from a population that is largely, totally removed from what went on for 20 years in Afghanistan and Iraq. We, as a citizenry, while we say thank you for your service, and they might give you a discount at the big box store or at the chain restaurant for your service, those are nice tokens. But what those men and women who serve for is a higher calling. It's the same oath you take in the military as you do when you take office. And it's one to protect our country from enemies, foreign and domestic. And I don't think veterans get the cred and the due propers, as they say, for what they did and what they contributed. While we've got people like Turner who think it's all about supplying them with weapons and more weapons and bombs and everything else. I find the whole idea of treating veterans as some sort of elevated part of the community a little weird, me personally. Okay? For me, I think every American should spend time serving their country. I believe in mandatory public service for a year or year and a half after you graduate from high school, whether it be something like the Civilian Conservation Corps or just working in your community, taking care of the elderly in nursing homes or cutting grass or fixing playgrounds or being a playground supervisor for kids. Those are the sorts of things that teach us about the importance of civility and love for one another. And when Eisenhower ended it, he said, "We pray that peoples of all faith, all races, all nations may have their great human needs satisfied, that those now denied opportunity shall come to enjoy it to the full, that all who yearn for freedom may experience its spiritual blessings, that those who have freedom will understand also its heavy responsibilities, that all who are insensitive to the needs of others will learn charity, that the scourges of poverty, disease, and ignorance will be made to disappear from the earth, and that in the goodness of time all peoples will come to live together in a peace guaranteed by the binding force of mutual respect and love, not by buying better fighter planes, bombers, missiles, or threatening to use them." So, how do we really want to honor our veterans? How do we want to make a system that says, thank you for your service? Well, number one, we want to cut the red tape out for trying to do business with the federal government for service-disabled veteran-owned businesses like mine. They have somehow come up with an idea that the General Services Administration should be the gatekeeper and you need a GSA schedule to get a contract. Now, what the GSA knows about my industry, diddly squat. They have requirements that if you get this GSA schedule, it's only good for 2 years unless you land at least $30,000 or $50,000 in a contract. And then they have this requirement that if you are to land a contract, you have to have past performance, and it's a catch-22. How do you get past performance without landing a contract? Good question. So I landed a contract. I did a series of videos for the Cincinnati VA. This was probably the most fulfilling, rewarding project I've ever worked on in advertising. We went down to the Cincinnati VA, filmed at length, and did these documentary-style videos talking about the services available to veterans in Cincinnati. Because the biggest problem is a lot of veterans don't even know what the VA offers, and they've heard horror stories about the levels of care or the quality of care in those facilities. Now, I'm not going to say all VAs are the same. I'm not going to say none of them make mistakes. People aren't perfect, and medicine is an art more than it is a science. But we helped restore the faith of veterans in the tri-state in going into the Cincinnati VA with this project. And I was very proud of the work. You can see some of it on my website at thenextwave.biz. There's right there on the front page, there's a link to some of those videos. But what I've got to say here is I was incredibly disappointed that I did not get past performance because the contract wasn't at least $250,000. So there I go. I'm still in the same exact place, and I haven't gotten another government contract yet. And the person who I did the work for can't write past performance because the contract wasn't big enough. It's those kinds of things, that kind of BS that our government is famous for, that makes people hate government, that Mike Turner has not done a thing to help. His idea of helping is getting contracts to large defense contractors, like the one he used to work for, MTC, which is now owned by BAE. And that is his idea of helping you. Because when it comes to helping veterans, to serving them, the only organization that does that job in this country, other than a bunch of volunteers, is the VA. Now, I've got to say, when I started taking care of my veteran that I was 100%, is now 100% disabled, who had bounced around without help for 20 years, you know the organization that helped out the fastest, the best, the most? It was the Blue Star Mothers of America. When I went to the Montgomery County Veterans Service Commission to ask for help so I could get down payment for his rent because he was homeless, they barely budged on $400. Blue Star Mothers wrote the check right away, and they didn't even ask for it back. They also went out and bought all the supplies he would need for a kitchen. They bought him bedding. They helped get the place ready. Mothers of other veterans, of other people serving. That's who you can count on. Because we are underfunded. The VA has a shortage of psychiatrists, psychologists. We don't have long-term mental health care facilities in the VA system or in this country. Those are the things we need, because trying to forget what happened to you in a war is something that usually doesn't happen. And if we want to support our veterans, we need to do that. And I don't think Mike Turner gives one iota of a gnat's butt about supporting veterans because he voted no on the PACT Act. If any of you have any questions about veteran services, I'd love to answer them. I see that I-70 is having wet dreams about Trump allowing him to fire the crappy folks at the VA. Well, how about the contract he steered to a medical records company for worth billions instead of developing from the basic healthcare record system that the VA pioneered. The VA's had electronic medical records before anybody else. The system needs a massive overhaul, but that would require investment. And instead, we steered the contract under Trump to a private corporation where we'll pay out the yin-yang forever and ever for services as opposed to running it properly ourselves. So there's your answer there. I already said to the Celtic, what's his face? No, I did not serve in combat. I served from 1981 to 1987. I have friends who served in Nicaragua and El Salvador, and I knew some people that died in Grenada. But that was a long time ago. That answers your question. Anyways, back to helping veterans. Our communities need to understand things like fireworks are hard on veterans. Shootings are hard on veterans. Sometimes police authority is hard on veterans, especially the mentally ill. I can tell you that from the experiences with the veteran I take care of. We need mental health professionals out on the streets to help manage some of these people who are permanently scarred by what happened to them in the military. All right, so I don't see any other questions. I appreciate those of you who've stayed on. I appreciate those of you who have entered in later and asked questions. We'll be back tomorrow at 4 p.m. with another subject, and if you've got an idea for that, please drop it in the comments on this post. You can find out more at electesrari.com. If you'd like to donate, you can do that. You can subscribe to my weekly newsletter there at electesrari.com/subscribe. And most important, subscribe to this YouTube channel with the subscribe button, and make sure you hit the little bell for notifications so you know when we go live every day. So if we're doing it at a different time, you'll know. It's a really great system. And again, I plan on doing this all the way through once I'm elected to let you know what happened in Congress every single day. No other congressman has done this. I plan on being the first. I'm David Esrati. I want to be your congressman. I appreciate all of you taking the time to watch and join in and participate. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.